The rope cut deep into Clara's wrists, drawing blood that froze before it could drip. February in the Colorado mountains showed no mercy, and neither did the good people of Silver Creek. Witch! The word echoed off the canyon walls, carried by dozens of voices that once called her neighbor, Martha Henderson, whose fever Clara had broken just last summer, spat at her feet. Tom Morrison, whose wife Clara had helped through a difficult birth, held his torch higher. The flames reflected in his eyes, turning them into something inhuman. Clara stumbled through the snow, her torn dress offering no protection against the bitter wind. Each step sent shooting pain through her bare feet. Behind her, the mob pressed forward, driving her deeper into the wilderness. She could still smell smoke on her clothes, all that remained of the small cabin where she'd practiced her healing arts. They'd burned it at dawn, along with her mother's herb journals and the dried plants she'd spent years collecting. "Please," she gasped, though her voice barely carried. "The child had scarlet fever. I tried everything." "You cursed him," screamed Elizabeth Hartley, the dead boy's mother. Her grief had transformed into something wild and dangerous. "You put your devil's mark on my William." Clara wanted to explain again how she'd recognized the symptoms too late, how the fever had already damaged the boy's heart before she'd even seen him. But explaining required breath, and the thin mountain air offered precious little. The procession stopped at a rocky outcrop where the trail ended. Below, the mountainside dropped away into a maze of ravines and frozen streams. Above, the peaks rose like tombstones against the gray sky. Reverend Samuel Morrison stepped forward, his black coat making him look like a crow among the townspeople. He'd arrived in Silver Creek just 3 months ago, bringing with him talk of Satan's servants hiding among God's faithful. "Clara Wren," he intoned, his voice carrying the authority of scripture and suspicion. "You stand accused of consorting with dark forces, of practicing unholy arts that brought death to an innocent child. What say you?" Clara lifted her head, meeting his cold gaze. Blood from a cut on her forehead trickled into her eye. "I say you're a fool, Reverend, and fools make murderers of good people." A gasp ran through the crowd, even now, even beaten and bound. She wouldn't beg. It was this defiance, perhaps more than any healing herbs, that had sealed her fate. "She curses us even now," someone shouted. The Reverend raised his hand for silence. "The Lord has shown us the way, as our ancestors knew. A witch cannot survive God's own judgment. Let the mountain decide her fate. If she be innocent, surely the Almighty will provide." They cut her bonds then, but not out of mercy. Frozen fingers couldn't grasp rope to climb down, couldn't fashion shelter from the wind. 2 men shoved her forward, and Clara fell to her knees at the edge of the outcrop. "Go," the Reverend commanded. "Go, and let God's creation be your judge." Clara looked back once at the faces she'd known, some fearful, some righteous, some already turning away. Then she began her descent into the white wilderness below. The first 100 yards were almost manageable. Adrenaline kept her moving, picking her way down between ice-covered rocks. But as the mob's voices faded behind her, replaced by the howling wind, her body began to fail. Her feet, already bloodied, went numb. Her fingers turned blue, then white. Ice crystals formed on her eyelashes, making it hard to see. By nightfall, she'd found a shallow cave beneath an overhanging rock. She crawled inside, curling into herself like an animal. No fire. She had no means to make one. And even if she had, the smoke might bring them back. In the darkness, she pressed her hands against her stomach, trying to preserve what little warmth remained. That's when the visions began. Her mother appeared first, standing at the cave entrance with her medicine bag. "Foolish girl," she said, though her voice held only love. "I taught you to heal, not to trust. I'm sorry. Mama?" Clara whispered through cracked lips. "I'm so sorry." The vision shifted. She was 8 years old again, burning with fever while her mother pressed cool cloths to her forehead. "You're special, my Clara," her mother had whispered. "You see what others miss, feel what others ignore. It's a gift, but gifts can be dangerous in a world that fears what it doesn't understand. More memories flooded through her fevered mind. Her father's death from pneumonia when she was 12. Despite all her mother's remedies, the first time she'd successfully set a broken bone. The look of wonder in a young mother's eyes when Clara had eased her baby's colic with chamomile and gentle massage. And then, darker memories. The townspeople's whispers when her mother died. The way men looked at her. A young woman living alone, practicing medicine without a husband or father to legitimize her work. The gradual shift from gratitude to suspicion each time she succeeded where the town's drunk doctor had failed. Should have married Tom Morrison when he asked. She muttered to the darkness. Should have pretended to be simple. Should have let them die rather than risk their fear. But even as she said it, she knew it for a lie. Healing was in her blood, in her bones. She could no more stop trying to help than she could stop breathing, though perhaps that would stop soon enough. The second day brought a brief respite from the storm, but also hallucinations. She saw William Hartley, the boy she'd failed to save, playing in the snow outside her cave. His laughter turned to coughing, then to silence. "I tried," she told his ghost. "The fever had already reached your heart, if your mother had brought you sooner." The boy's spirit said nothing, just smiled sadly before dissolving into the swirling snow. Hunger gnawed at her belly like a living thing. She tried eating snow, but it only made her colder. Her dress, already torn from her flight down the mountain, provided almost no protection. She could no longer feel her feet, which was perhaps a mercy. When she looked at them, they'd turned an ugly, gray-purple color that she recognized from treating frostbite in others. On the third day, she could no longer stand. She crawled from the cave, driven by some instinct she didn't understand. Perhaps it was the desire to die under the open sky rather than trapped in stone. Or perhaps some part of her still hoped for rescue, though she knew none would come. The good people of Silver Creek had washed their hands of her. She made it perhaps 50 feet before collapsing in a small clearing. The snow felt almost warm against her face. Above her, an eagle circled, and she wondered if it was waiting for her to stop moving entirely. "Not a bad place to die," she whispered. The mountains were beautiful in their cruelty, painted in shades of white and gray and the pale blue of shadows on snow. Her mind drifted to the irony of it all. She'd spent years learning to cheat death, to coax life back into failing bodies. Now her own body was failing, and all her knowledge was useless. Can't brew tea with no fire, can't apply poultices with frozen hands, can't heal a spirit broken by betrayal. The eagle cried overhead, a lonely sound that echoed her own heart. As darkness crept in from the edges of her vision, Clara heard something that didn't belong, the crunch of footsteps in snow. Too heavy for a deer, too steady for a bear. Human footsteps, but not the hurried gait of townspeople. These steps were measured, careful, the walk of someone who knew these mountains. A shadow fell across her face. She tried to focus, but her eyes wouldn't cooperate. She saw only shapes, tall, broad-shouldered, wrapped in furs. Not one of the townspeople. Then, they wouldn't dress so practically. Hands touched her face, surprisingly gentle. A voice spoke in a language she didn't recognize. Though the tone was clear enough, surprise, perhaps concern. Then stronger arms than she'd ever felt lifted her from the snow. The last thing Clara remembered was the smell of leather and wood smoke, and the steady rhythm of those footsteps carrying her away from the clearing, away from death, though whether toward salvation or simply a different fate. She couldn't know. The mountains kept their secrets, and now, it seemed, she would become one of them. Warmth. That was the first sensation that penetrated the fog of near death. Not the burning warmth of fever, but something steady and real, a fire crackling nearby, fur blankets heavy on her body, the scent of pine smoke and cooking meat. Clara's eyes fluttered open to see wooden beams above her, chinked with mud and moss. A cabin, but not like any she'd known in Silver Creek. This was built by someone who understood the mountains, who knew how to turn wood and stone into a fortress against winter. She tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. Pain shot through her limbs as blood flow returned to damaged tissue. Her feet especially screamed in agony. A good sign. Paradoxically, dead flesh didn't hurt. "Don't move!" The voice came from her left, deep and accented in a way that marked the speaker as not native to English. Clara turned her head slowly to see the man who'd carried her from the snow. He was Indian, Cheyenne, if she had to guess from the beadwork on his shirt. Tall and broad-shouldered, with black hair falling past his shoulders and eyes dark as winter nights. Scars marked his face and hands, some old and white, others newer, the scars of a warrior. Though he moved around the cabin with surprising grace for such a large man. "Who?" Clara's voice came out as a croak. The man, she realized she thought of him as a man first, Indian second, which would have scandalized the good people of Silver Creek, brought her a cup of something warm, pine needle tea. She recognized by the scent, good for fever and infection. "Drink," he said, supporting her head with one hand. "Slow." She sipped carefully, the warm liquid soothing her raw throat. When she'd finished, he settled back on his haunches, studying her with those unreadable eyes. "I am Nathan," he said finally. "Nathan Walking Bear, though most whites can't pronounce my real name." Clara almost laughed at the anglicized first name. Some missionaries' work, no doubt. "Clara," she managed. "Clara Wren. I know who you are." His expression didn't change. The witch woman of Silver Creek. Fear shot through her, but she was too weak to run even if her feet had allowed it. "Are you going to take me back?" Now something did flicker in his eyes. "Amusement? Why would I do that? They left you to die. That makes you no longer their concern." He stood and moved to the fire, where something bubbled in an iron pot. "Besides," he added without turning, "I have no love for Silver Creek or any white town." Clara studied her rescuer as he worked. His movements were efficient, practiced. This was a man used to solitude, to self-sufficiency. The cabin reflected that, everything in its place, everything with a purpose. Herbs hung from the rafters. She recognized many of them. Weapons rested within easy reach, and shelves held supplies organized with military precision. "Why save me then?" she asked. Nathan ladled soup into a wooden bowl. "Would you prefer I hadn't?" "That's not an answer." He brought her the bowl, along with a carved wooden spoon. "Can you hold it?" She tried, but her hands shook too badly. Without comment, he sat beside her and began feeding her himself. The soup was simple: venison, wild onions, some root vegetables she couldn't identify, but it tasted like heaven. "I saved you," he said between spoonfuls. "Because leaving someone to die in the snow is what they do, not what I do." Clara wanted to ask more, but exhaustion was pulling at her again. Nathan seemed to recognize this. He set the half-empty bowl aside and adjusted her blankets. "Sleep," he commanded. "Healing takes time." Over the following days, a routine developed. Clara would wake to find Nathan already up, tending the fire or preparing food. He would help her eat, check her injuries with clinical detachment, then go about his business. He hunted, chopped wood, maintained his weapons, all while she drifted in and out of consciousness. What struck her most was the silence, not uncomfortable or heavy, just present. Nathan didn't feel the need to fill the air with words. After years in Silver Creek, where gossip flowed like water, Clara found it strangely soothing. On the fourth day, she felt strong enough to examine her own injuries. Her feet were the worst. Several toes showed the dark discoloration of severe frostbite. In Silver Creek, the doctor would have amputated. But as she looked closer, she saw Nathan had been treating them with a poultice she recognized, wild chamomile and other herbs to promote circulation. "You know medicine," she said when he returned from hunting. A rabbit hanging from his belt. He glanced at her feet. My grandmother was a healer. These poultices, they're good, very good." She paused. "Thank you." Nathan skinned the rabbit with quick, sure strokes. You would do the same. How do you know that? Because you treated the Arapaho boy last summer, the one the white doctor refused to see. Clara blinked in surprise. She had treated a native boy who'd been injured in a fall, but it had been done quietly. At night. How did you... Word travels. Nathan set the rabbit meat to roast. Not all whites would risk their reputation for an Indian child. Fat lot of good my reputation did me, Clara said bitterly. Nathan made that sound again, not quite a laugh, more an acknowledgement. Reputation is what others think. Character is what you are. You chose character. That night, Clara had the nightmare. She was back in Silver Creek, tied to a stake while flames licked at her feet. The townspeople stood in a circle, their faces twisted into grotesque masks. Reverend Morrison read from his Bible, but the words came out as serpents that writhed through the air. She woke screaming, thrashing against the blankets. Strong hands held her shoulders, not restraining but grounding. You're safe, Nathan's voice cut through the panic. It's a dream. You're safe. Clara's breath came in gasps. Sweat soaked through her shift despite the cold. She realized she was gripping Nathan's arms hard enough to leave marks. I'm sorry, she whispered, releasing him. Don't be. He stayed where he was, solid and unmoving. Dreams have power. Sometimes they need to be fought. Do you have nightmares? The question slipped out before she could stop it. Nathan was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, yes, but I've learned to make peace with my ghosts. He stayed beside her until her breathing steadied, then returned to his own bedroll across the room. Clara lay awake, studying the patterns firelight made on the ceiling, wondering what ghosts haunted a man like Nathan Walking Bear. As the days passed and her strength returned, Clara became more aware of the strange dance they performed around each other. Nathan was unfailingly polite, but kept careful distance. He helped her when necessary, but never lingered. When their hands accidentally touched, he pulled back as if burned. She understood caution. God knew she had reasons enough for her own, but there was something else in Nathan's careful distance, something that spoke of old pain. One evening, as she practiced walking on her still tender feet, she noticed him cleaning his rifle with unusual focus. I'm not going to break, she said. You can look at me. Nathan's hands stilled. I know you won't break. Then why do you act like I'm a ghost myself? He set down the rifle and finally met her eyes. Because the last white woman I tried to help got me these. He touched a series of scars on his neck. Her husband's gift for laying hands on his property. Clara felt her stomach twist. I'm sorry. You didn't do it. He picked up the rifle again. But I learned. Help when needed. Keep distance always. I'm not married, Clara said quietly. Not anyone's property but my own. No, you're something more dangerous. Nathan's voice was flat. You're a woman alone who doesn't want to be saved, who doesn't beg or bargain or promise things she won't deliver. You say thank you and mean only thank you. Clara didn't know how to respond to that, so she continued her slow circuit of the cabin. Each step hurt, but it was healing hurt, the kind that promised better days ahead. That night, as they ate dinner in their customary silence, Clara found herself studying Nathan's face in the firelight. He wasn't handsome by Silver Creek standards, too angular, too marked by violence, but there was something compelling about him, a stillness that ran soul deep. Why do you stay up here alone? She asked. Nathan considered the question. Why did you stay in a town that feared you? It was home. Was it? Clara thought about that. Had Silver Creek ever truly been home? Or just a place she'd stayed because her mother was buried there, because leaving felt like abandoning the only connection to her past? No, she admitted. I suppose it wasn't. The mountain doesn't judge. Nathan said, it's hard, dangerous, unforgiving, but it's honest. It tries to kill you because that's its nature, not because it fears or hates. And you prefer that. To smiling faces that hide knives? Yes. They lapsed back into silence. But it felt different now. Less like two strangers sharing space and more like, Clara wasn't sure what, understanding, Perhaps that night, the nightmare didn't come. Instead, she dreamed of eagles soaring over snow-covered peaks. And when she woke, Nathan was already up, brewing pine needle tea in the gray pre-dawn light. He handed her a cup without speaking, and she accepted it the same way, for the first time since her mother died. Clara didn't feel alone. The morning sun cast long shadows through the pines as Nathan led Clara down a narrow deer path. 2 weeks had passed since her rescue, and though her feet still ached, she could walk for longer stretches now. Nathan moved ahead of her, silent as always, his rifle slung over one shoulder. "Where are we going?" Clara asked, though she'd learned not to expect immediate answers from him. "You'll see." They descended through a grove of aspens, their bare branches clicking like bones in the wind. Clara pulled the borrowed coat tighter, one of Nathan's, far too large but blessedly warm. The path wound between massive boulders, following some ancient route known only to animals and those who paid attention. Then she heard it, a low rumbling like distant thunder. Steam rose between the rocks ahead, and the air took on a mineral tang that made her think of the earth's deep places. "Hot springs," Nathan said, gesturing to a series of pools carved into the stone by centuries of flowing water. "Sacred to my people, healing waters." The pools descended in natural terraces, each one flowing into the next, steam rising like incense into the cold air. The rocks around them were stained orange and white from minerals, creating patterns that looked almost like cave paintings. "It's beautiful," Clara breathed. Nathan set down his rifle and the pack he'd been carrying. "My grandmother brought me here when I was young, said the waters know how to heal what medicine cannot touch." He glanced at her. "Your feet need more than poultices." Clara understood. The frostbite had healed as much as it would on its own, but she still couldn't feel 2 of her toes properly. In Silver Creek, that would mean eventual amputation. But here, "I should—" She gestured vaguely at her dress. "I'll check the perimeter." Nathan picked up his rifle. "Call if you need me." He disappeared into the trees with the same quiet grace he did everything. Clara stood alone by the pools, steam dampening her face. Slowly, carefully, she began to undress. The cold air bit at her exposed skin, but she forced herself to continue. Her dress fell away, revealing what the townspeople's cruelty had left behind. Bruises had faded to yellow-green shadows. The rope burns on her wrists had scabbed over. But there were older marks, too. A burn scar on her shoulder from when she'd tried to save her mother's books from a kitchen fire. White lines on her hands from years of working with knives and needles. She eased into the nearest pool, gasping as the hot water enveloped her. The temperature difference was shocking at first, making her skin prickle and burn. But gradually, her body adjusted. Muscles she hadn't realized were clenched, beginning to relax. The water was perfectly clear despite its heat, and she could see every mark on her body wavering beneath the surface. In Silver Creek, she'd always bathed quickly, efficiently, avoiding her own reflection. But here, surrounded by stone and steam and silence, she felt something inside her uncurl. She closed her eyes and sank deeper, letting the water support her weight. The mineral scent filled her lungs, and she imagined she could feel the mountain's heart beating through the stone beneath her. A branch cracked nearby. Clara's eyes flew open to find Nathan standing at the edge of the clearing, his back to her. "There are clothes in the pack," he said without turning. "When you're ready." "Nathan." His name came out softer than she intended. "You don't have to leave." His shoulders tensed. "Yes, I do. Why?" The question hung in the steam between them. "Because I'm white? Because you're afraid? Or because you think I'm afraid?" He turned then, slowly, his eyes finding hers across the water. Something shifted in his expression, the careful walls cracking just a little. "Because you don't know what you're asking," he said quietly. "Don't I?" Clara rose slightly in the water, steam curling around her shoulders. "I'm asking you to stop looking at me like I'm made of glass, like I'm something that will shatter or disappear." Nathan took one step closer, then another. His dark eyes never left hers. "You nearly died 2 weeks ago." "But I didn't." She held his gaze. "I'm here, alive, real." He knelt at the pool's edge, close enough that she could see the fine lines around his eyes, the way his hair caught blue highlights in the sun. Slowly, as if approaching a wild animal, he reached out and touched one of the scars on her shoulder. "Who did this?" His voice was rough. "Life," Clara said simply. "Same as yours." His fingers were calloused but gentle as they traced the old burn. Then, with the same deliberate care, he began to speak in Cheyenne. The words flowed like water, musical and strange. Clara didn't understand them, but she understood the tone, recognition, blessing, acknowledgement. When he finished, she asked, "What did you say?" "That scars are the map of survival. That you wear yours like others wear paint." He withdrew his hand. "That you are stronger than you know." Clara caught his hand before he could pull away completely. His skin was warm, rough from work and weather. "Then why do you keep running from me?" "I'm not running from you." His thumb brushed across her knuckles. "I'm running from what wanting you might mean." The admission hung between them, honest and raw. Clara felt her heart racing, and not from the water's heat. "What might it mean?" she whispered. Nathan's jaw tightened. "Everything." The word carried weight, promises and threats and history she didn't fully understand. But Clara had spent her whole life being careful, being proper, keeping appropriate distance. Look where that had gotten her. She drew his hand to her lips and kissed his palm, tasting gun oil and pine. Nathan made a sound low in his throat, surprise or surrender. She couldn't tell. "Clara." Her name on his lips was a warning. "I know," she said. "I know all the reasons this is impossible. Indian and white, man and woman with no church blessing, 2 people who've been broken and badly mended. I know." She rose from the water then, no longer caring about modesty or propriety. Steam rose from her skin, and she saw Nathan's eyes follow the droplets as they traced paths down her body. "But I also know," she continued, stepping from the pool, "that impossible things happen every day. I've seen them, made them happen with herbs and hope when medicine said there was none." Nathan stood slowly, his height forcing her to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. He reached out, his hands framing her face with infinite care. "You don't understand," he said roughly. "My people already think I'm cursed. That I bring death, adding you to my life, would bring more death." Clara laughed, short and sharp. "Nathan, they already tried to kill me. I've got nothing left to lose. You have your life." "No." She covered his hands with hers. "I have existence. There's a difference." Something in his expression broke then. He pulled her against him, and Clara gasped at the contrast. Her naked skin against his clothed body, cold air at her back and furnace heat at her front. His hands tangled in her wet hair, and when his mouth found hers, it was like coming home to a place she'd never been. The kiss was desperate, hungry. Years of isolation and loneliness poured into the connection. Clara clung to him, uncaring that she was soaking his clothes, uncaring about anything but the solid reality of him. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. "This is madness," he said. "Yes," Clara agreed. "The best kind." He laughed then, the first real laugh she'd heard from him. It transformed his face, revealing the man he might have been in a kinder world. Slowly, deliberately, he began removing his own clothes. Clara watched, memorizing each revealed expanse of skin. His body was a testament to survival, scars cross-hatching his chest and arms. Old wounds that spoke of battles she could only imagine. But underneath the damage was strength, beauty in its rawest form. When he stood naked before her, she saw his vulnerability, not physical, but emotional. This was trust in its purest form. "The water's healing," she said softly, extending her hand. He took it, allowing her to lead him into the pool. The heat made him hiss through his teeth, but he followed her deeper, until they stood chest deep in the steaming water. "Now," Clara said, moving closer. Tell me about these. She touched a particularly nasty scar across his ribs. Cavalry sword. He said, Fort Robinson, 1868. She pressed her lips to it, feeling him shudder. And this? Her fingers found a round scar on his shoulder. Bullet, my uncle's. Actually, his voice was tight with memory. He thought I'd betrayed our location to the soldiers. I hadn't, but my brother died in the raid anyway. Clara's heart clenched. She understood now, the isolation, the careful distance. He'd been blamed for tragedy, cast out by those who should have protected him, just as she had. We match, she said quietly, showing him the still healing cuts on her wrists from the ropes. Nathan caught her hands, studying the wounds with dark eyes. Then, slowly, he raised each wrist to his lips, kissing the damaged skin with reverence that made her eyes burn. No more running, he said against her skin. No more distance. Clara wound her arms around his neck, pressing close until she couldn't tell where she ended and he began. The water lapped around them, steam rising like prayers into the winter sky. When he kissed her again, it was different, slower, deeper, a claiming and a promise. His hands mapped her body under the water, learning each curve and hollow, while she did the same to him. They came together in the ancient pool with desperate tenderness, two souls recognizing their match against all odds and reason. Afterward, they floated in the cooling water, Clara's head on Nathan's shoulder, his arms anchoring her. What happens now? She asked. Nathan was quiet for a long moment. Now we heal, he said finally. Together. The sun was setting by the time they dressed and made their way back to the cabin. Nathan had brought clean clothes for her, soft doe-skin dress and leggings that must have belonged to a Cheyenne woman once. They fit better than anything she'd worn in years. That night, as they lay together before the fire, Nathan told her about his brother, about the raid that went wrong, the accusations that followed, the years of wandering before he'd found this place. Clara shared her own ghosts, her father's cruelty disguised as righteousness, the pastor who'd tried to save her through pain, her mother's death that had left her alone, and suspect. They talked until dawn, filling in the spaces between their scars with words and understanding. When the sun rose, they were still entwined, two survivors who'd found in each other not just desire, but recognition. Home, Clara thought as she drifted off to sleep in Nathan's arms. Not a place, but a person. After all the searching and suffering, she'd finally found home. The first sign of trouble came with the spring thaw. Nathan spotted the tracks while checking his trap lines, boot prints too fresh and too many to be a lone hunter. He crouched in the mud, reading the story written there. 5 men, maybe 6, moving with purpose rather than wandering. We need to leave, he told Clara when he returned to the cabin. She looked up from the herbs she was drying, her hands stilling. 3 weeks had passed since the hot springs. 3 weeks of building something fragile and precious between them. They've found us? Not yet, but they're looking. Nathan began pulling supplies from shelves with practiced efficiency. The tracks are 2 days old. Heading north, they'll circle back when they don't find anything. Clara stood, automatically beginning to help him pack. Where will we go? Higher. There's a place I know. Harder to reach, easier to defend. He paused, meeting her eyes. Unless you want to go east, I could take you to Denver, put you on a train. Nathan, she crossed to him, placing her hands on his chest. We've discussed this. I'm not running without you. This isn't your fight. Isn't it? Clara gestured to herself, wearing Cheyenne clothing, her hair braided in the style he'd taught her. You think they'll see any difference between us now? The truth of it hung heavy between them. In saving her, in loving her, Nathan had made her an enemy to both worlds, just as she'd done to him by accepting that love. They worked through the night, packing only essentials. Nathan showed her how to distribute weight in a pack, how to wrap her feet for long mountain travel. As dawn broke gray and uncertain, they struck out westward, leaving the cabin that had become their sanctuary. The journey was brutal. Spring in the high country meant mud, swollen streams, and unpredictable weather. They climbed paths that were barely suggestions in the stone, crossed ridges where wind tried to pluck them from the mountain's face. Clara's body, still recovering from her ordeal, screamed with each step, but she refused to complain. On the second day, as they traversed a narrow valley, they heard horses. Nathan pulled her behind a cluster of boulders, his body covering hers. Through a gap in the rocks, Clara could see riders picking their way along the valley floor. Her heart sank as she recognized one of them, Jake Morrison, the Reverend's son. The others were strangers, hard-faced men who rode with the casual vigilance of those comfortable with violence. Said she was heading north. Jake's voice carried on the wind. Which probably died in the snow, but Pa wants proof. And the Indians? Another rider asked. $500 bounty from the territorial governor. Apparently, he killed a family down near Pueblo last fall. Clara felt Nathan tense. She knew without asking that it was a lie. He'd been here, alone, until he'd found her. The riders passed without spotting them, but the damage was done. They weren't just fleeing superstition now. They were being hunted for bounty. That night, huddled in a shallow cave, Clara tended a gash on Nathan's leg from a fall on loose shale. Her hands shook as she cleaned the wound. $500, she said quietly. That's more than most men see in 2 years. It'll bring professionals. Nathan agreed. Not just townspeople with torches. I'm sorry. The words tasted bitter. If I hadn't... Don't! His hand covered hers. We both chose this. Did we? Or did we just choose to survive? Nathan was quiet for a moment. Is there a difference? They reached his hidden camp on the 4th day, a narrow ledge beneath an overhang, invisible from below and accessible only by a treacherous climb. A spring trickled from the rock face, and ancient fire rings showed this had been a refuge for generations. My grandfather's grandfather knew this place, Nathan said as they collapsed, exhausted, on the ledge. It's sacred ground, neutral territory where enemies could meet in peace. And now it's just forgotten. They spent a week there, recovering their strength and watching the valleys below for signs of pursuit. Clara learned to move silently on stone, to read weather in cloud formations, to find food in what looked like barren rock. Nathan taught her with patience she'd never experienced from any man, correcting without criticizing, praising small victories. But even in their mountain sanctuary, the world intruded. One morning, Clara woke to find Nathan gone. His rifle remained, which meant he expected no trouble. But anxiety gnawed at her until he returned near midday, his face grave. What is it? She asked. He held out a piece of paper, a bounty notice, water-stained but readable. Her own face stared back at her from a crude drawing. Alongside the words, Wanted, Clara Wren, accused witch and murderess, believed consorting with savage Indians, $200 reward. Where did you find this? Tacked to a tree at the lower camp, fresh. His jaw tightened. They know we're in the area. Clara studied her sketched face. The artist had given her wild eyes and sharp features, more demon than woman. Murderous? The Hartley boy. They're saying you poisoned him deliberately. Of course they are. She crumpled the paper. Dead witches tell no tales. That afternoon, as storm clouds gathered, they saw smoke rising from the valley, their abandoned cabin burning. Nathan watched with no expression, but Clara saw his knuckles whiten as he gripped his rifle. I'm sorry, she said. That was your home. No. He turned to her. Home is where you choose to stand and fight. That was just shelter. Thunder rolled across the peaks, and the first fat raindrops began to fall. They retreated deeper under the overhang as the storm unleashed its fury. Lightning illuminated the landscape in stark, violent moments, flash after flash revealing a world transformed by water and wind. In the storm's chaos, Clara almost missed the sound of horses on the trail below. Nathan heard it, though. In one fluid motion, he had his rifle ready, pushing Clara back into the deepest shadows. Through the rain, they could see shapes moving on the lower path, too far to identify, but too purposeful to be lost travelers. The riders paused at the trail's fork. One dismounted, examining something on the ground. Nathan's hand found Clara's in the darkness, squeezing once in warning. Then, miracle or disaster. A native girl burst from the brush, running full tilt up the mountain. She couldn't have been more than 16, her dress torn, blood streaming from a cut on her face. Behind her, the riders shouted and spurred their horses. "Whiskey traders," Nathan breathed. "They must have raided a camp." The girl scrambled up the rocks with desperate agility, but her pursuers were gaining. One raised a rifle. Before Clara could think, she was moving. She grabbed Nathan's pistol and fired into the air, once, twice, the shots echoing like thunder off the canyon walls. The riders' horses reared, spooked by the sound and the storm. "Up here!" Clara shouted in English, then attempted the few Cheyenne words Nathan had taught her. "Safety! Come!" The girl's head snapped up. She changed direction, climbing toward their ledge with renewed energy. The traders recovered quickly, but the storm and the treacherous footing worked in the fugitives' favor. Nathan was already moving, rigging a rope to help the girl up the final cliff face. Clara kept the pistol trained on the trails below, though she doubted she could hit anything in this weather. The girl reached the rope just as her pursuers rounded the lower bend. Nathan hauled her up with impressive strength while Clara fired again, this time aiming for the rocks near the riders. Stone chips flew, and the men ducked. "You're harboring a thief," one shouted. "She stole from honest traders. Like you stole her in the first place?" Clara shouted back. More shots were exchanged, but the storm and elevation worked in the defenders' favor. After several minutes of futile attempts, the traders withdrew, shouting threats and promises of return. The girl collapsed on the ledge, gasping. Up close, Clara could see bruises on her arms, the telltale signs of rough handling. She spoke rapidly in Cheyenne, gesturing back toward the valley. Nathan's face darkened as he listened. "She says they hit her camp at dawn, killed the men, took the women. She escaped when they got drunk." Clara was already moving, bringing water and checking the girl's injuries. "What's your name?" "Rose Standing Deer," the girl managed in accented English. You are the witch woman?" Clara's hand stilled. "How do you know that?" "Stories travel. They say you heal with plant magic, that you live with Nathan Walking Bear, who speaks with mountain spirits." Nathan snorted. "Mountain spirits. They make me sound like a medicine man." "Aren't you?" Rose looked between them with eyes too old for her face. "You saved the witch woman from white man's justice. She saved me from white man's mercy. Maybe you are both medicine." They tended Rose through the night, Clara treating her physical wounds while Nathan coaxed out more of her story. The camp had been small, mostly women and children with a few old men. Easy prey for armed traders looking for wives to sell in mining camps. "We have to help them," Clara said. Nathan's expression was carefully neutral. "It's not our fight." "Isn't it?" Clara gestured to Rose. "How is this different from you finding me in the snow?" "Because going after whiskey traders is a good way to end up dead. Both of us. And her." Rose spoke up, her young voice steady. "I did not ask for rescue. Only for the men to follow me here. Away from the others. My sisters, they will think I'm dead. They will not fight. They will not hope." Clara met Nathan's eyes across the fire. "We can't just do nothing. You're asking me to start a war." "I'm asking you to finish one they started." Nathan was quiet for a long time, staring into the flames. Finally, he spoke. "My brother died because I tried to be a hero, because I thought I could change things, save people. I learned that day that sometimes trying to help just brings more death. And sometimes," Clara said softly, "not trying brings worse than death." Rose pulled something from her dress, a small beaded pouch. "This was my grandmother's. She said it would protect me. It didn't." She held it out to Nathan. "But maybe it will protect you, if you help my sisters." Nathan took the pouch with hands that shook slightly. He opened it, revealing a small carved stone, worn smooth with age. His breath caught. "This is..." He looked at Rose sharply. Your grandmother was Mary Standing Deer? Rose nodded. You knew her? She taught my mother the old ways, before the soldiers came. He closed his fist around the stone. She was the one who told me about this place. Said it would shelter those who fought for justice. He looked at Clara, and she saw the moment his decision crystallized. The man who'd saved her was still there, under all the scars and caution. All right, he said. We'll get them back, but we do this smart. No heroics, no glory, just tactics. Rose's eyes filled with tears. Thank you. Don't thank us yet, Nathan warned. Thank us when you're all safe. As they began planning, Clara felt something shift in the air, a sense of purpose that had been missing. They were no longer just running, just surviving. They were choosing to stand for something. The storm passed near dawn, leaving the world washed clean and dangerous. In the first light, Nathan studied the terrain with a tactician's eye while Clara prepared what medical supplies she had. They'll be hung over, Nathan said. Sloppy, but there are at least 6 of them, maybe more. We'll need to even the odds. I can shoot, Clara offered. Not well, but enough. And I can track, Rose added. Show you where they make camp. Nathan nodded slowly. Then we have a chance. Slim, but real. As they prepared to descend from their sanctuary, Clara caught Nathan's arm. Your brother. This won't bring him back. No, he agreed. But maybe it will let him rest. They shared a fierce kiss before setting out, tasting promise and fear in equal measure. Whatever came next, they would face it together, witchwoman and warrior, united by loss, bound by choice, fighting for strangers who'd become family in a single storm-torn night. The mountain watched them go, ancient and indifferent, keeping its own counsel about who would return to seek sanctuary in its shadows. The Cheyenne camp appeared through the morning mist like something from another time. Tippies arranged in a traditional circle, smoke rising from cooking fires, children playing despite the early hour. But as they drew closer, Clara saw the signs of change. Canvas tents mixed with buffalo hide lodges, iron pots alongside traditional clay vessels, and too many graves marked with crosses as well as spirit poles. Nathan stopped at the camp's edge, his body tense. It had been 3 days since they'd rescued Rose's sisters from the whiskey traders, a brutal fight that left 2 traders dead and the others scattered. Now they faced a different kind of battle. They know we're here, he said quietly. Indeed, warriors were already moving to intercept them, weapons ready. Clara recognized the lead man, Samuel Blackhorse, whose reputation as a war chief had reached even Silver Creek. His face showed no emotion as he studied Nathan. Walking Bear. The name came out like an accusation. You dare return? I bring rescued captives, Nathan replied in Cheyenne. Rose Standing Deer and her sisters. And a white woman. Blackhorse's eyes fixed on Clara with undisguised hostility. You compound your dishonor. Nathan stepped forward, placing himself between Clara and the warriors. She is a healer. She helped save your people. Our people? Blackhorse laughed bitterly. You gave up that claim when you failed your duty. An elderly woman emerged from the crowd that was gathering, small, bent with age, but radiating authority. Clara recognized the bearing of a matriarch, someone whose word carried weight beyond physical strength. Enough, Samuel! Her voice cut through the tension. Let them enter. The council will decide. This was Rebecca White Elk, Rose had told them, the eldest of the camp's women and keeper of the old traditions. Her eyes studied Clara with unsettling intensity. You are the one they call witch, she said in accented English. Clara lifted her chin. I am a healer, nothing more, nothing less. We shall see. They were given a teepee at the camp's edge, close enough to be watched, far enough to be marked as outsiders. Rose and her sisters were whisked away by relatives, though Rose managed one grateful look before disappearing. Well, Clara said as they settled into the dwelling, that went better than being burned at the stake. Nathan didn't smile. The night is young. Over the following days, Clara existed in a strange limbo. The women watched her with suspicion, the men with open hostility. Children were pulled away when she passed. Only the camp's dogs seemed willing to accept her presence, following her in hopes of scraps. Nathan fared worse. Warriors who had once fought beside him now turned their backs. He was given the tasks of women and boys, gathering wood, hauling water, deliberate insults that he bore with stone-faced dignity. "Why do you accept this?" Clara asked one evening as she tended cuts on his hands from chopping wood with a deliberately dulled axe. "Because fighting would prove them right." He flexed his fingers, testing her bandaging. "They think I'm controlled by anger, by white influence. If I show patience, they'll see you're still Cheyenne?" His smile was sad. "They'll see I'm trying to be." Everything changed when the fever came. It started with the children. Always the children first. Clara had learned. High temperatures, delirium, a rash that spread like fire across their skin. By the second day, adults were falling ill. By the third, the camp's medicine man was among the sick. Clara found Rebecca White Elk standing outside the medicine lodge, her weathered face etched with worry. "Your healer is ill," Clara said simply. "Let me help. You would poison us faster." Samuel Blackhorse interjected, pushing between them. "This sickness comes after you arrive. We are not fools." "The sickness comes from contaminated water." Clara shot back. "Your stream runs past a mining camp upstream." "I've seen this before." "Lies." "Then let me prove it. Give me 3 days. If the fever doesn't break, you can burn me yourself." Rebecca studied her for a long moment. "And if you fail?" "Then Nathan goes free, unharmed, with supplies." Clara met the older woman's eyes steadily. "That's my price." "Clara, no." Nathan gripped her arm. "You don't know what you're asking." "I know exactly what I'm asking." She covered his hand with hers. "Trust me." Rebecca made her decision. 3 days, but you work under watch, and you touch nothing without permission." Clara threw herself into the fight against the fever with everything she had. She identified it quickly. A waterborne illness she'd seen in Silver Creek when the mine tailings had contaminated wells. The treatment was simple in theory, brutal in practice. Clean water, fever reduction, and careful nursing through the worst of it. But she faced resistance at every turn. Warriors blocked her from the sick until Rebecca intervened. Mothers snatched medicine from their children's lips, fearing poison. Even those who wanted to trust her struggled against generations of justified suspicion. On the second night, as she worked by firelight to prepare more medicine, Nathan found her crying silently into her hands. "The Morrison boy," she whispered. "The one who died in Silver Creek. His mother is right. I am cursed. Everything I touch." "Stop." Nathan knelt before her, lifting her chin. "Look around. Half the camp is already improving. You did that. But the children who won't take the medicine, we'll take it now." Rose Standing Deer appeared in the lodge entrance. Several young women behind her. "We've been talking. You saved us from the traitors. We'll help you save our people," with Rose translating and vouching for her. Clara's work became easier. The young women became her assistants, learning to prepare the willow bark tea and apply cooling compresses. They sang traditional healing songs while Clara worked, blending her medicine with their own. By dawn of the third day, the fever had broken in all but the most stubborn cases. Parents who'd cursed her now brought their children for treatment. Warriors nodded grudgingly when she passed. But Clara's real vindication came when she traced the sickness to its source, with Nathan and several warriors as witnesses. She showed them the mine upstream, the tailings washing directly into their water source, the dead fish floating in the eddies. "This is what the white man's gold hunger brings," she said. "Not curses, not witchcraft, just poison wearing the mask of progress." Samuel Blackhorse stared at the contaminated stream, his face cycling through emotions. Finally, he turned to Nathan. "You chose a woman who sees clearly. Perhaps you saw clearly too." That night, the camp held a feast. Clara sat in a place of honor. though she still felt the weight of watchful eyes. Rebecca White Elk presented her with a necklace of beads and elk teeth. "You have earned a name among us," the elders said. "Medicine woman who sees truth. It is not a Cheyenne name, for you are not Cheyenne, but it is a name of respect." Clara's throat tightened. "Thank you." "Do not thank me yet." Rebecca's eyes glinted. "Respect must be earned again each day, and there are harder trials coming." As if summoned by her words, a commotion arose at the camp's edge. Warriors rushed past, weapons drawn. Nathan tensed, hand moving to his knife. A lone rider approached, a Cheyenne warrior Clara didn't recognize, his horse lathered with sweat from hard travel. He spoke rapidly to Black Horse, gesturing back the way he'd come. Nathan's face went pale as he translated. "Army troops, 3 days behind him. They're coming here." "How many?" Black Horse demanded. "A full company. Maybe more." The messenger slumped with exhaustion. "They say they're looking for renegades who killed white traders. They have warrants." All eyes turned to Nathan and Clara. The unspoken accusation hung in the air. Their rescue of Rose's sisters had brought this doom. "We'll leave," Nathan said immediately. "Draw them away." "No." Black Horse's voice was firm. "You are one of us again. Walking bare, flawed, perhaps, but ours. We do not give our people to the blue coats. But Clara chose her path when she healed our children." Rebecca White Elk stood, every inch the matriarch despite her small stature. "The army wants someone to hang for those traitors' deaths? Let them come. We have buried too many to fear more graves." The camp erupted into organized chaos. Weapons were readied. Defensive positions planned. The sick were moved to hidden shelters while warriors painted for battle. Clara found herself in the medicine lodge, preparing bandages and poultices for wounds not yet inflicted. Her hands shook as she worked. "I brought this on them," she said when Nathan appeared. "If I hadn't insisted on helping Rose, then those girls would be slaves or dead." He pulled her against him. "And this camp would have lost half its children to fever. Stop carrying guilt that isn't yours." "How do you do it?" She pressed her face against his chest. "How do you face the weight of consequences?" "By remembering that not choosing is also a choice." His arms tightened around her. "You chose to heal. That's never wrong. Whatever comes after." A young warrior interrupted them. "Black Horse calls for Walking Bear, and—" He hesitated. "For the medicine woman who sees truth." They found the War Council in heated debate. Some argued for fleeing deeper into the mountains. Others wanted to make a stand. A few suggested surrendering those the army sought, though these voices were quickly shouted down. "What would you have us do?" Black Horse asked Nathan. "You know the white man's ways better than most." Nathan considered. "They want someone to blame. Give them that, but on our terms." He looked at Clara. "You still have that wanted poster?" She nodded, understanding dawning. "You want to use me as bait." "Not bait. Distraction." His smile was sharp. "The army thinks they're hunting a witch and a renegade. Let's give them what they expect to see, while the camp moves to safety." Rebecca White Elk cackled. "Clever. Use their own blindness against them." Plans formed quickly. Most of the camp would scatter into small groups, harder to track and pursue. Nathan and Clara, with a handful of volunteers, would lead the army on a false trail north, while the others went south to established safe grounds. "It's dangerous," Black Horse warned. "If they catch you, then we'll hang," Clara said bluntly. "But not before we lead them so far into the mountains they'll spend weeks finding their way out." Rose Standing Deer pushed through the crowd. "I'm coming with you." "No," Nathan said immediately. "Yes." Her young face was set with determination. "This started with my rescue. It should end with my choice." Before anyone could argue further, another scout arrived. The army was closer than expected. 2 days, maybe less. Time for debate was over. That night, Clara stood outside the teepee she shared with Nathan, watching the camp dissolve around her. Families packed with practiced efficiency, erasing signs of their presence. By dawn, This place would look abandoned for years rather than hours. Second thoughts? Nathan asked, joining her. Always, but not enough to change my mind. She leaned into his warmth. Is this what your life was before? Always running? No. He turned her to face him. Before was just running. Now I have something to run toward. They made love that night with desperate tenderness, knowing it might be their last time. When Clara cried out, Nathan covered her mouth with his, swallowing her sounds like prayers. Afterward, they lay entwined, listening to the camp's quiet dissolution. If we don't make it, Clara began, we'll make it. But if we don't, then I'll find you in the next world. His certainty was absolute. Death is just another journey. I'll track you through whatever comes after. Clara kissed him, tasting promise and farewell in equal measure. Tomorrow they would run, fight, perhaps die. But tonight, they were simply two people who'd found each other against all odds, holding tight in the darkness. The last thing she heard before sleep took her was Nathan whispering in Cheyenne, words she didn't understand but felt in her bones. Later, Rose would tell her what they meant. My heart beats with yours, in this world and all others. It was both less and more than I love you. It was recognition, promise, and acceptance rolled into one. It was everything. Dawn came too soon, bringing with it the sound of horses and hard choices. But Clara rose to meet it without fear. She'd been branded a witch and left to die once. This time, she would choose her own path, with a man who saw her truly and people who'd claimed her despite their fears. Let the army come. She'd faced worse odds with less reason to survive. Now, with the Nathan beside her and purpose in her heart, Clara Wren, medicine woman who sees truth, was ready for whatever the mountains would bring. The aftermath of the fever epidemic brought an uneasy peace to the camp. Clara had earned her place as a healer, but trust was still fragile, measured in careful nods and gradually warming glances. She worked alongside the camp's recovering medicine man, Joseph Singing Crow, learning traditional remedies while sharing her own knowledge. Your hands know the plants, the old man told her one morning as they gathered herbs. But your spirit still fights itself. Clara paused in her cutting of willow bark. What do you mean? You heal others, but not yourself. The wound they gave you in that white town, it still bleeds. Before Clara could respond, a commotion erupted from the main camp. She and Joseph hurried back to find chaos, horses rearing, warriors shouting, women pulling children to safety. At the center of it all stood Reverend Samuel Morrison, accompanied by a dozen armed men from Silver Creek. Clara's blood turned to ice. The Reverend looked older, harder, his black coat dusty from travel. His eyes found her across the camp and lit with righteous fury. There she is, he pointed dramatically. The witch who corrupted our town and murdered an innocent child. Nathan appeared at Clara's side, rifle ready, around them. Cheyenne warriors formed a protective circle, but Clara could see the situation balanced on a knife's edge. One wrong move would turn the camp into a battlefield. Reverend Morrison. Clara stepped forward, placing a hand on Nathan's arm to hold him back. You're a long way from your pulpit. I go where God sends me. His voice carried that familiar cadence of condemnation. Even into this den of heathens to retrieve one of our own. I was never one of yours. You were baptized in our church. Your mother lies in our cemetery. You belong to Silver Creek, whether for salvation or judgment. Chief Black Horse emerged from his lodge, Rebecca White Elk beside him. The chief's presence commanded immediate attention. You bring weapons to a peaceful camp, Black Horse said in careful English. State your business and leave. Morrison's lip curled. My business is with the white woman you harbor. She stands accused of witchcraft and murder. I have warrants. He produced papers with an official seal. Clara recognized them. Territorial warrants that technically held legal weight even here. She also stands accused of corrupting a Christian soul. Morrison's eyes fixed on Nathan with disgust. Living in sin with a savage, turning from God's light. Nathan moved faster than thought. His knife appeared at Morrison's throat before any of the Reverend's men could react. Nathan, no! Clara caught his wrist. This is what he wants. Don't give him his martyr's death. For a moment, violence hung in the air like smoke. Then Nathan stepped back, lowering the knife. Morrison straightened his collar, trying to recover his dignity. You see, the savage shows his true nature, and you defend him, proving your corruption runs soul deep. What do you want? Clara asked tiredly. Really want? It's not justice. If you cared about that, you'd have investigated the real cause of William Hartley's death. I want you to come back willingly, face trial, accept judgment. Morrison's voice dropped. Confess your sins, and perhaps God will show mercy. The same mercy you showed when you burned my home? When you tied me and left me to die? Murmurs ran through the gathered Cheyenne. Many understood enough English to follow the conversation. That was regrettable, Morrison admitted. The townspeople acted from fear, but you survived, which surely shows God's hand. It shows Nathan's hand. Clara interrupted. He saved me when your Christian charity failed. Morrison's face darkened. Then you've made your choice. So be it. He turned to address the camp. I offer you one chance. Surrender the witch and her corrupted paramour, and we leave in peace. Refuse, and I return with the army. They're already looking for renegades who killed white traders. How long before they connect those deaths to this camp? The threat hung heavy. Clara felt the shift in atmosphere. Calculation replacing solidarity. Some of the warriors exchanged glances, weighing costs. You would threaten children and elders. Rebecca White Elk's voice cut through the tension. This is your Christian mercy? I threaten no one. I simply state facts. You know. Morrison pulled out a pocket watch, checking it with theatrical precision. You have 1 hour to decide. We'll wait outside your camp. He turned on his heel, his men following. But at the camp's edge, he paused. Clara, he called back. Your mother prayed for your soul until her last breath. Would you dishonor her memory by dying among heathens? The words hit like physical blows. Clara felt Nathan's hand on her back, steadying. My mother, she said clearly, taught me that God lives in healing, not judgment. She would understand my choices. Can you say the same about yours? Morrison left without answering. The council that followed was fierce. Warriors argued, women debated, voices rising and falling like tide. Clara and Nathan stood in the center, the eye of the storm. We should go, Nathan said quietly. Lead them away. Running solves nothing, Black Horse countered. They'll follow, and others will suffer. Then what? A warrior named James Talltree demanded. Fight. Bring the army down on our heads for harboring fugitives? They are not fugitives, Rebecca White Elk said firmly. She healed our children. He is one of us. We do not trade lives for peace. Even if those lives bring war? The argument continued, circling like buzzards. Clara felt each word as a weight, knowing that her presence had brought this danger. She was about to speak when Rose Standing Deer pushed through the crowd. I have something to say, the girl announced. You're too young, someone began. Too young? Rose's eyes blazed. I was old enough to be taken by traitors, old enough to be saved by these two. Now I'm old enough to speak. She turned to address the camp. The witch woman, Clara, risked everything to save me and my sisters. She could have stayed hidden, stayed safe. Instead, she chose to help strangers. And when the fever came, she fought for our children when she could have let them die and been rid of us. Rose pulled something from her pouch, a small, dried flower. My sister was one of the sick. Without Clara's medicine, she would have died. How do we repay that? By throwing her to the wolves? The girl speaks truth. Joseph Singing Crow said, I was among the sick. This woman's knowledge saved me when my own medicine failed. The spirits worked through her hands. Pretty words. James Talltree said, but they won't stop bullets. No, Clara said, finally finding her voice. They won't. She moved to the center of the circle. I won't let anyone die for me. Not again. She looked at Nathan. We'll go. Face Morrison. End this. Clara. No, listen. She addressed the camp. You've shown me more acceptance in weeks than Silver Creek did in years. I won't repay that by bringing destruction to your door. And if we refuse to let you go? Rebecca White Elk asked. Clara smiled sadly. Then I thank you. But this is my choice. The hour was almost up when she emerged from the teepee she'd shared with Nathan. She wore her white woman's clothes again, the dress they'd found for her, properly laced and buttoned. Her hair was pinned up in the style of Silver Creek. She looked like what Morrison expected to see. Nathan walked beside her, but he hadn't changed. He wore his Cheyenne clothing with pride, weapons visible. Every inch the savage Morrison condemned. The Reverend waited with barely concealed triumph. You've chosen wisdom. I've chosen to prevent bloodshed, Clara corrected. Nothing more. Where are your warrants? Nathan demanded. Morrison produced them again. Nathan studied the papers carefully. These name Clara Wren, an unknown Indian companion. No specific person. You're named clearly enough. No. A new voice interrupted. Samuel Blackhorse strode forward. He is not. The war chief had painted his face for battle, but his weapons remained sheathed. I am Samuel Blackhorse, war chief of this band. I confess to killing the traitors who took our women. I am the unknown Indian companion your papers seek. Morrison sputtered. That's not... You can't... Can't I? Blackhorse smiled coldly. Your papers name no specific man. I volunteer to fill that role, unless you doubt the word of a war chief. This is ridiculous. This is law, Rebecca White Elk interjected. Your own law. Will you honor it? Or does your justice bend to convenience? Morrison's men shifted uneasily. They'd come for a witch and her lover, not to challenge an entire warrior society. The woman still must answer for her crimes, Morrison said, but uncertainty colored his voice. Then she will. Clara stepped forward. In a court of law, with proper representation. Not in your kangaroo trial designed for spectacle. You'll find no sympathy in any court. Perhaps not, but I'll find law, process, things you abandoned when you burned my home. She turned to Nathan, speaking in the Cheyenne phrases he'd taught her. His eyes widened, then softened with understanding. What did you say? Morrison demanded. I told him I'll return. Clara said simply, that this isn't goodbye. It was a lie. She'd actually told Nathan she loved him in the only way she could before these watching eyes. But Morrison didn't need to know that. Chief Blackhorse comes with us, she continued. You wanted your pound of flesh? You have it. 2 lives for your justice. That should satisfy even Silver Creek's bloodthirst. Morrison clearly wanted to object, but his men were already relaxing, glad to avoid a fight. He'd gotten something, even if not exactly what he'd planned. Mount up, he ordered curtly. We ride within the hour. As they prepared to leave, Rose approached Clara one last time. This is wrong, the girl said fiercely. You shouldn't sacrifice yourself. Clara touched Rose's cheek gently. Sometimes the greatest medicine is knowing when to let a fever break. This has burned long enough. Nathan pulled her aside, his control finally cracking. Don't do this. We can fight. And how many die? Rose, Rebecca, children we saved from fever only to lose them to bullets. Clara gripped his hands. You told me once that not choosing is also a choice. I choose to end this cycle. I can't lose you. You won't. She pressed something into his hand, her mother's medicine pouch, the one thing she'd saved from her burning home. Keep this. I'll come back for it. Nathan kissed her fiercely, not caring who watched. When they parted, his eyes held promises that needed no words. The ride from camp felt like a funeral procession. Clara sat straight-backed on the horse they'd provided, Morrison's men surrounding her like prison guards. Beside her, Blackhorse rode with the dignity of a chief, making the Reverend's men look shabby by comparison. As they crested the ridge above camp, Clara looked back one last time. The Cheyenne stood watching. Men, women, and children she'd come to know. Nathan stood apart, a lone figure against the sky. She raised her hand in farewell. He did the same. Then the ridge came between them, and Clara faced forward. Whatever came next, trial, Imprisonment, possibly death. She would meet it knowing she'd chosen love over fear, healing over hatred. Morrison rode beside her, already composing the sermon he'd preach about the witch brought to justice. He didn't understand that she'd already won. She'd found acceptance, love, and purpose. She'd discovered who she truly was, and someday, somehow, she would return to claim it. The mountains watched them go, keeping their ancient silence, but on the wind. Clara swore she heard Cheyenne voices raised in song, a farewell, a promise, a prayer for the medicine woman who sees truth. She smiled through her tears and rode on toward whatever justice awaited in the world below. The gunshot echoed across the valley like thunder. Nathan dropped, blood spreading across his chest, his eyes finding Clara's in the chaos. "No!" Clara tore free from her captors, falling to her knees beside him, her hands pressed against the wound, already knowing what her healer's training told her. Too much blood, too close to the heart, around them. The battle raged. Morrison's men had walked into Nathan's carefully planned ambush, but that first lucky shot had found its mark. Cheyenne warriors descended from the ridges while Morrison's group scrambled for cover. "Clara!" Nathan gasped, blood bubbling on his lips. "Listen, don't talk. Save your strength." She ripped fabric from her skirt, trying to staunch the flow, but they both knew the truth. "Marry me." The words came out fierce despite his weakness. "Here, now. Nathan, please." His hand found hers, slick with blood. Let me call you wife, just once." Through her tears, Clara saw Rose approaching, keeping low to avoid the gunfire. The girl's face was pale but determined. "Rose, you know the words," Nathan managed. "The old way, please." Rose nodded, understanding immediately. She began speaking in Cheyenne, her young voice carrying over the sounds of battle, the marriage ceremony of her people, ancient words binding two souls. Clara repeated the phrases Rose taught her, stumbling over pronunciation but pouring her heart into every syllable. Nathan's responses grew weaker, but his eyes never left hers. "Now you," he whispered. "Your way." Clara's voice broke. "Do you, Nathan Walking Bear, take me as your wife, to have and hold, in sickness and health?" "Yes." The word was barely a breath. "Then I, Clara Wren, take you as my husband. Till death." She couldn't finish. Nathan raised a trembling hand to her face. "Not death, just different paths. I'll wait." Black Horse appeared, laying down covering fire. "We need to move. I can't leave him. Go!" Nathan's grip tightened with surprising strength. "Live, heal. That's how you honor this." He pressed something into her hand, a ring made from braided horsehair and silver. She recognized it as one he'd worn since she met him. "My grandmother's," he managed. "For my wife, so everyone knows." Clara slipped it onto her finger, then kissed him with all the desperate love and grief in her heart. "I'll find you," she promised. "In whatever comes after." Nathan smiled, that rare, transformative expression she'd worked so hard to earn. "I know." His eyes fluttered closed just as Black Horse hauled Clara to her feet. "He's gone. We have to go." They ran through smoke and gunfire. Clara's world reduced to the ring on her finger, and the image burned into her memory. Nathan's last smile, peaceful despite everything. The battle's tide had turned. Morrison's men, caught off guard and outnumbered, were falling back, but the Reverend himself pushed forward, pistol in hand, eyes wild with righteous fury. "Witch!" He spotted Clara through the smoke. "This is your doing!" He raised his weapon, but Rebecca White Elk appeared like a ghost, her own rifle steady. The shot took Morrison in the shoulder, spinning him around. "Run, child!" Rebecca shouted. "We'll hold them!" But Clara was done running. Something had broken inside her when Nathan fell, or perhaps something had finally come together. She walked through the battlefield like it was a garden, untouched by the violence swirling around her. She found her medicine bag where it had fallen, knelt beside a wounded Morrison's man, and began treating his injuries, then another, and another. "What are you doing?" Black Horse demanded. What I've always done. Clara's voice was steady, empty of everything but purpose. Healing. The fighting gradually stopped as both sides realized what was happening. This white woman, this witch, was treating wounded without regard for which side they'd fought on. Morrison, clutching his bleeding shoulder, staggered toward her. You're helping them? After you killed my husband? Clara looked up at him, and something in her eyes made him step back. Yes, because that's what healers do. We don't choose who deserves life. We just fight for it. She turned to a young Cheyenne warrior with a leg wound. Hold still. This will hurt. The aftermath was surreal. Enemies sat side by side, being treated by the same hands. Clara moved between them like a spirit, focused only on the work. Rose and other women helped, following her lead. When the last wound was bandaged, Clara finally stopped. She stood in the center of the battlefield, blood-soaked and hollow-eyed, and looked at the assembled survivors. Enough, she said quietly, but her voice carried, haven't we bled enough? Morrison, his arm in a sling, stepped forward. You're still under arrest. No, Black Horse interrupted. She's under our protection, as widow of Walking Bear. She has rights by our law. Your law means nothing. And yours, Rebecca White Elk challenged. Your law that burns healers and calls it justice. Clara raised a hand for silence. I have a proposition. Everyone waited. I'll build a healing place, here, at the border between worlds, somewhere both peoples can come for aid without fear. She looked at Morrison. You want me where you can watch me? Fine, but I won't hang for healing, and I won't stop helping those in need. The town will never. The town will accept it, Clara said firmly, because the alternative is more of this, more death, more vengeance, more blood feeding blood. How many sons will you sacrifice to your fear, Reverend? Morrison's resistance crumbled. He looked older suddenly, diminished. And him? He gestured to where Nathan had fallen. Clara's composure finally cracked. He was my husband, for 5 minutes. He was my husband, and I'll mourn him every day while continuing his work, building bridges between peoples who'd rather build walls. The healing house rose slowly over the following months. Built where the mountain met the valley, it stood as neutral ground. Clara used knowledge from both worlds, Cheyenne wisdom and white medicine, herbs and surgical tools, prayers in multiple languages. People came cautiously at first, a white miner with a broken arm, willing to risk the witch's care because the nearest doctor was days away, a Cheyenne child with fever, whose mother had heard of the medicine woman who sees truth. Each successful healing brought more. Rose Standing Deer became her first apprentice, bridging languages and cultures with youthful enthusiasm. Other young women followed, both native and white, learning that healing knew no boundaries. Morrison visited once, near winter's end. He found Clara treating an elderly white woman alongside a Cheyenne warrior, both patients chatting amiably as Clara worked. They say you refuse payment. He said, I take what's offered. Food, firewood, knowledge. Clara didn't look up from her work. Healing isn't commerce. And you claim no allegiance, to no people, no faith. Now she did look at him. I claim allegiance to life, Reverend, to the sacred act of healing. If that makes me godless in your eyes, so be it. Morrison studied the ring on her finger, the braided horsehair and silver that marked her as Nathan's widow. You still wear it. Always. Her hand moved unconsciously to touch it. Some bonds transcend death. The town, they speak differently of you now. Some even say you were right about the water contamination, that you tried to warn us. Does it matter? William Hartley is still dead. Nathan is still dead. All because fear speaks louder than reason. Morrison had no answer for that. He left without sermon or condemnation, a broken man who'd lost his certainty. The first anniversary of Nathan's death brought unexpected visitors. A delegation from the Cheyenne camp, led by Black Horse himself. They brought gifts, blankets, herbs, a horse. Walking Bear saw clearly. Black Horse said simply, We honor his vision by honoring his widow. That night, Clara sat alone outside the healing house, watching stars appear over the mountains. The ring on her finger caught moonlight as she worked on documenting new remedies Rose had taught her. You kept your promise, she whispered to the night wind. You're waiting, aren't you? Patient as always. The wind stirred, carrying the scent of pine and something else, leather and wood smoke, achingly familiar. For a moment, she could almost feel him there, solid and warm and real. I'm building something beautiful, she continued, tears sliding silently down her cheeks. Something that will last. Children who would have died are living. Enemies are becoming neighbors. Your death, it means something. A wolf howled in the distance, answered by another. The ancient call of creatures who mated for life, separated but still singing to each other across the darkness. Clara closed her eyes and listened, adding her own silent song to theirs. A promise, a prayer, a love letter to a ghost who taught her that home wasn't a place but a choice. And she chose to keep building what they'd started together. In the healing house behind her, patients slept peacefully, tended by young women who would carry the work forward. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new wounds to heal, new bridges to build. But tonight, Clara simply sat with her memories and her ring and her unshakable faith that somewhere, in whatever came after, Nathan Walking Bear was waiting with that transformative smile, ready to take her hand and lead her home. The mountains kept their silence, but the stars seemed to pulse with promise. And in the wind, if she listened closely, she could hear the echo of Cheyenne words. My heart beats with yours, in this world and all others. Always. 5 years had passed since Nathan's death. The healing house had grown into a small settlement, 3 buildings now, with gardens of medicinal herbs and a stable for patients who traveled far. Clara's hair showed threads of silver, and her hands bore the calluses of countless healings, but her eyes remained clear and purposeful. This morning brought an unexpected visitor. Margaret Hartley stood at the door, clutching a shawl around her thin shoulders. The woman who'd screamed witch and led the mob looked smaller now, worn by grief and time. Mrs. Hartley. Clara's voice held no anger, only mild surprise. How can I help you? Margaret's voice broke. I've come to learn. Clara studied her for a long moment, then stepped aside. Come in. The main room of the healing house was warm and herb-scented. Rose Standing Deer looked up from grinding willow bark, her expression carefully neutral at the sight of Silver Creek's most vocal witch hunter. I'll make tea, Rose said diplomatically, disappearing into the kitchen. Margaret sat stiffly, eyes roaming the room, shelves of medicines, charts of human anatomy, books in multiple languages. They say you teach anyone who wants to learn. That's true. Even those who... Margaret's hands twisted in her lap. Even those who wronged you? Clara sat across from her, movements deliberate and calm. Especially them. Healing begins with understanding what caused the wound. My William, Margaret's composure cracked. I know now. I know it wasn't your fault. The scarlet fever had already... You tried to tell me. You were grieving. Grief makes us seek someone to blame. I nearly killed you. The words came out raw. I led them to burn your home, to cast you out. And in doing so, you led me here. Clara gestured to the room around them. To this work, to purpose I might never have found in Silver Creek. Margaret looked up, tears streaming. How can you forgive? Because holding on to hatred is like gripping a hot coal. It only burns the one who holds it. Clara leaned forward. You want to learn healing arts? Yes, I've lost so much to ignorance. My son, my peace, my faith in neighbors. I want to understand, to help others avoid my mistakes. Clara considered. Around them, the healing house hummed with quiet activity. Other students preparing medicines, patients resting in adjoining rooms. It won't be easy, Clara warned. You'll need to unlearn as much as you learn. Work alongside people you were taught to fear. Question beliefs you held sacred. I know. Margaret's chin lifted. I'm ready. And so Margaret Hartley became Clara's most unlikely student, working beside Cheyenne women and Mexican traders' daughters, learning that healing recognized no borders of race or creed. The seasons turned. The healing house's reputation spread far beyond the local valleys. A doctor from Denver visited, expecting to find primitive superstition, and left humbled by the sophisticated blend of traditions. A Cheyenne medicine man came to share knowledge and stayed to teach alongside Clara, one autumn day, as golden aspens blazed against blue sky. A group of strangers arrived, hard-faced men with the look of professional guns, led by someone Clara recognized with a chill, Jake Morrison, the Reverend's son, now wearing a federal marshal's badge. "Clara Wren," he announced. "You're under arrest for the murder of Nathan Walking Bear." The healing house went silent. Rose's hand moved to the knife at her belt, but Clara raised a hand for calm. "Nathan was my husband," she said evenly. "Why would I?" New witness came forward, says you poisoned him during that battle 5 years ago. Used your witch's arts to make it look like a bullet wound. Jake's smile was cold. "Seems the territorial governor wants to clean up these irregular settlements." Clara understood immediately. The healing house had become too successful, too threatening to those who profited from division. Someone wanted her gone. "I'll need to gather medical supplies," she said, "for the journey." Jake nodded, confident in his victory. He didn't notice the meaningful look Clara exchanged with Rose that night, as Clara sat under guard in the healing house. The mountains came alive with signal fires. Rose had spread the word. The medicine woman who sees truth was threatened. They came from all directions. Cheyenne warriors painted for battle, white settlers who'd been healed at the house, Mexican shepherds whose children Clara had delivered, even a contingent from Silver Creek, led by a determined Margaret Hartley. By dawn, Jake Morrison faced not a lone woman, but a community. "Stand aside," he ordered, but his voice lacked conviction. "No." Margaret stepped forward. "You want to arrest someone for murder? Arrest me. I'm the one who killed William, killed him with ignorance and fear. Clara tried to save him." "And me," said James Fletcher, a miner Clara had treated for poisoning. "I killed my partner 3 years back in a claim dispute. Never been caught. You want a murderer? Take me." One by one, people stepped forward with confessions, real or invented. It didn't matter. The message was clear. To take Clara, Jake would have to arrest half the territory. Black Horse emerged from the crowd, every inch the war chief despite his graying hair. "The woman you seek is under tribal protection as widow of Walking Bear. Your territorial law has no power here." "She's white. She's a healer." Rebecca White Elk's voice carried absolute authority. "Recognized by council. Accepted by ceremony. Your papers mean nothing." Jake's men shifted nervously. They'd expected an easy arrest, not a standoff with half the population. Clara rose, moving through the crowd to face Jake directly. "You have a choice. Try to take me and start a war that will bleed both peoples dry, or accept that justice isn't always what's written on paper. Your father lost his way when he let fear guide him. Don't make his mistake." She pulled a letter from her pocket. "This arrived last month. From him." Jake read his father's shaking handwriting. "I was wrong. The woman I called witch has done more healing than I managed in 20 years of preaching. God's work takes many forms. Let her be." The marshal's shoulders sagged. "He wrote this 2 weeks before he died, peacefully, in his sleep, after I treated his failing heart." Clara's voice gentled. "He found peace at the end. You can too." Jake looked around at the assembled crowd, faces of every color, united in purpose. "My orders?" "Tell them she died," Black Horse suggested. "Years ago, in the mountains. No body recovered. Tell them the truth," Clara countered. "That healing happens here. The people are choosing cooperation over conflict. That maybe, just maybe, We're building the future instead of repeating the past. Jake holstered his pistol slowly. I'll need proof of death, something convincing. Rose stepped forward with a bundle. Clara's old dress, the one she'd worn from Silver Creek, torn and blood-stained from that long-ago flight. She died in the snow, Rose said firmly. This is all we found. Clara Wren is dead. Only the medicine woman who sees truth remains. Jake took the dress, understanding the fiction they were creating. And Nathan Walking Bear died defending his people, Black Horse said, as warriors do, with honor. The marshal nodded slowly. Then I suppose I'm chasing ghosts. He turned to leave, then paused. My father, was he really at peace? He was, Clara assured him. He spoke of you often, said he hoped you'd find a truer path than his. Jake left with his men, carrying a torn dress and a story that would satisfy distant bureaucrats. The crowd dispersed slowly, people returning to their lives, but something had changed. They'd stood together, all of them, and discovered their shared strength. That evening, Clara climbed to the hot springs where she'd first loved Nathan. The pools steamed in the cooling air, unchanged by human dramas. She undressed slowly, seeing how time had marked her, scars from countless small injuries, hands roughened by work, the softening that comes with years. But the ring on her finger still gleamed, the braided horsehair somehow enduring despite daily wear. She sank into the warm water with a sigh, letting it hold her weight. 5 years of building, healing, teaching. 5 years of proving that bridges could be stronger than walls. I kept my promise, she said to the rising steam. Built something beautiful, something lasting. The wind stirred, carrying familiar scents. For a moment, just a moment, she felt arms around her, a presence as real as memory. I know, Nathan's voice whispered in her mind. I never doubted. Clara smiled, tears mixing with mineral water. Still waiting? Always, but no hurry. Your work's not done. And it wasn't. Tomorrow would bring new students, new patients, new challenges. The healing house would continue growing, spreading its influence like ripples on water. Rose would take on more responsibility. Margaret would overcome her last prejudices. And somewhere a child would live because of knowledge shared freely across cultural divides. But tonight, Clara simply floated in sacred waters, wearing her ring and her scars and her hard-won wisdom. A woman who'd been branded a witch and left to die had become something more, a bridge between worlds, a keeper of healing, a proof that love transcends even death. The stars emerged one by one, and Clara began to sing, an old Cheyenne morning song Nathan had taught her, mixed with hymns from her mother's kitchen, woven together like the cultures she served. Her voice echoed off stone, carrying across the mountains, reaching ears that needed to hear it. Somewhere in Silver Creek, Margaret Hartley paused in her studies to listen. In the Cheyenne camp, Rebecca White Elk smiled and added her voice to the distant song. Rose Standing Deer, preparing tomorrow's lessons, hummed along, and perhaps, in whatever realm spirits dwelt, Nathan Walking Bear heard his wife's voice and knew their love had birthed something greater than either could have built alone. The song ended, but its echo lingered. Clara rose from the waters, dressed, and walked back to the healing house. There was work to do tomorrow, and all the tomorrows after, but she would meet them with steady hands and an open heart, building the future one healing at a time. At the door, she paused, looking back at the mountains. Thank you, she whispered, to Nathan, to the land, to whatever force had taken a broken woman and forged her into something stronger. Then she went inside, where warmth and purpose waited, where the work of bridging worlds continued with each sunrise. The end came gently. Years later, on a spring morning with wildflowers blooming, Clara passed while teaching, her hands on a student's, showing the proper way to set a broken bone. She simply closed her eyes and stepped from one world to the next, seamlessly as breathing. They buried her beside the healing house, marking the grave with a simple stone. Clara Wren Walking Bear. She saw truth. She chose healing. But her real monument was the work that continued. Students becoming teachers, enemies becoming neighbors, fear slowly yielding to understanding. In death as in life, she remained a bridge between worlds, proving that love planted deep enough can grow through any soil, bloom despite any winter, and bear fruit for generations unborn, and somewhere beyond the veil, patient as mountains and eternal as stars. Nathan Walking Bear welcomed his wife home with the smile she'd crossed worlds to see again. Thank you for listening to this story of love, loss, and healing in the Old West. Where are you listening from today? Leave a comment below and let's connect across the miles, just as Clara connected people across divides. Don't forget to subscribe to From Wild West channel and share your thoughts about Clara and Nathan's journey. Did their story touch your heart? What did you think of their love that transcended prejudice and even death itself? Your comments mean the world to us.